I always loved running at night. The boardwalk stretched for miles, its wooden planks creaking under my sneakers as I moved. The ocean breeze cooled my skin, the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore filling the silence. No crowds, no distractions, just me and the quiet. That night was no different, or so I thought. I was about 3 miles in when it happened. My foot caught on something loose. I stumbled, steadying myself, just as I heard a metallic clink. My keys. I sighed, scanning the area. The keyring had slipped through a crack in the planks, vanishing into the shadows below. My stomach tightened. Damn it, I hesitated. I could just go home and explain to my parents, but I'd lost my keys before. If I admitted it again, I'd never hear the end of it. So against my better judgment, I stepped off the boardwalk and into the dark. The air was different underneath, thicker, stale. The ocean breeze was gone, replaced by the smell of rotting wood and damp seaweed. It was cooler, the sounds of the waves muffled beneath the planks. I turned on my phone flashlight, the sand beneath. The boardwalk was uneven, scattered with driftwood, crushed beer cans, and footprints leading in different directions. But there was something else, a stench. It was sharp, foul, like something had been rotting for days. I swallowed hard, forcing myself forward. Just find your keys and go. I crouched down, sweeping the flashlight across the sand. There, a few feet ahead, a faint metallic glint. I exhaled in relief, stepping toward it, and then something moved. A shadow flickered along one of the wooden pillars. I froze, my breath hitched, my fingers tightening around my phone. I swung the flashlight toward it. Nothing. The light illuminated only sand and wooden beams stretching toward the sea. No movement, no sound, but the unease didn't leave. My skin prickled. Something wasn't right. I had to get out. I grabbed my keys, my pulse pounding. The exit was close. I could see the moonlight filtering through the gaps in the planks. Then I had an idea. I reached down, yanking the shoelace from my sneaker. A simple marker. I'd thread it through the cracks above and tug it from below, signaling to my friends if I needed help. I pushed it through a gap, and then something yanked it from the other side. My stomach dropped. I stared at the frayed end of the lace in my hand, my heart thundering in my chest. Someone was above me, watching, waiting. I bolted. My feet pounded against the sand as I sprinted toward the exit. My breath came in sharp gasps, the heavy air suffocating. The wooden beams blurred around me, too many places for someone to hide. Then a hand wrapped around my ankle. I screamed. The grip was ice cold, fingers digging into my skin. I kicked wildly, my heel connecting with something solid. A low grunt sounded in the darkness. The hand let go. I didn't stop to look. I tore through the sand, bursting onto the boardwalk, gasping for air. The streetlights were blinding after the darkness below. I turned, expecting to see someone crawling out from under the planks, but there was nothing. Only silence, only the ocean stretching endlessly into the night. I ran all the way home. I locked every door, every window. I didn't sleep. The next morning I checked my ankle, bruises, purple fingerprints wrapped around the bone. But the worst, Art. That night, when I stepped outside for school, a shoelace was waiting on my doorstep, identical to the one that had been ripped away, but it didn't end there. 3 days later, I was in my bedroom, trying to convince myself it had been a prank, a coincidence. Then, my phone buzzed. A message. No number, no contact name, just 2 words. Nice run. I stared at the screen, my breath catching. No one knew. No one was there. At least, that's what I had thought. I checked the window. My bedroom overlooked the front yard, facing the street. The porch light flickered for just a second. Then I saw it, a figure standing across the road, not moving, not walking, just watching. My stomach turned to ice. The street lamp buzzed, its dim glow barely illuminating his shape. I couldn't see his face, but I knew. It was him, the person from beneath the boardwalk. The one who had grabbed me, the one who had my shoelace. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling. Then he stepped back, disappearing into the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I never ran at night again. I never went near the boardwalk alone. But sometimes, late at night, I check my window, and sometimes I swear I see a shadow standing across the street, watching, waiting for me to come back. I've always loved walking at night. There's something peaceful about it, especially during the off-season when the boardwalk is empty. No tourists, no loud crowds, just the distant roar of the ocean and the occasional flicker of a street lamp struggling against the wind. That night the air was cold, crisp with the lingering bite of autumn. My breath formed small clouds as I walked, my hands stuffed deep into my jacket pockets. Everything was still, too still, and then I felt it. Someone watching me. I slowed my pace, glancing over my shoulder. There, far behind me, stood a figure, a man. He wasn't walking, wasn't moving at all, just standing there, bathed in the dim orange glow of a flickering street lamp. A hood covered most of his face, but I could see his posture, rigid, unnatural, like a mannequin propped upright. I swallowed hard and picked up my pace. Maybe he was just another late-night walker. Maybe. A minute later I checked again. He was closer, but still not moving. No walking, no shifting weight from foot to foot, just standing. I quickened my steps, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a trick of the dim lighting, the way the street lamps flickered, making it seem like he had moved. But then I checked again, and he was even closer. Panic crept up my spine. I was walking fast now, nearly jogging, but when I turned my head again, he was almost at my heels. Still motionless, still not walking. My breath hitched. That was impossible. I should have heard his footsteps, should have seen him move, but he wasn't walking. He was just there. I sprinted. My shoes pounded against the wooden planks, the sea air whipping against my face as I tore down the boardwalk. I didn't care how crazy I looked. I just needed to get to my car. I reached the parking lot in seconds, my hands fumbling for my keys. And then my stomach dropped. The man was standing right where my car had been, not beside it, not behind it, exactly where it had been parked, except my car was gone. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. No, this wasn't real. I looked around, my pulse thundering in my ears. The parking lot was empty, no cars, no people, just him, standing dead center. I took another step back, then another. He didn't move, didn't blink. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe, say something, demand to know what was happening. But before I could, the streetlights flickered and he vanished. The silence that followed was unbearable. I stood frozen, my skin crawling, my legs trembling. My car was gone. The man was gone, but I was still there, alone, or at least I thought I was. The next morning, I reported my car stolen. The police didn't. Seemed too concerned. It was an old sedan, easy to hotwire. I didn't mention the man, because what could I even say? That someone who never moved had chased me, that he had been standing where my car should have been. They would think I was crazy. I took the bus home that day. As I stepped off at my stop, something caught my eye. A car parked at the curb. My car, right in front of my house. I stopped cold, my hands shaking. I approached slowly, my breath shallow. The doors were locked, the windows rolled up. Everything was exactly the way I had left it, except there was something in the driver's seat. A hoodie, folded neatly, placed right where the man had been standing. I never walked on the boardwalk again, but sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps, slow, deliberate. But when I look outside, there's no one there, only the faint outline of a hooded figure reflected in my car window. I hate public restrooms, always have. But when you gotta go, you gotta go. That night, I was driving home late after visiting some friends. It was nearly midnight and the roads were empty. Just me, the dark highway, and the endless hum of my tires against the asphalt. I had been holding it in for miles, but it was getting unbearable. Then I saw it, a small rest stop just off the road. One of those run-down gas stations that look abandoned, but technically aren't. The neon sign flickered above the empty parking lot. I pulled in, parking near the entrance. Something about the place felt wrong, but I shook it off, just in and out. I had no idea that stepping inside that bathroom would be one of the biggest mistakes of my life. The restroom was dimly lit, the overhead bulb buzzing faintly. There were 3 stalls. The first door was open, revealing a filthy toilet. The second was closed. The third had its door slightly ajar, swaying gently like someone had just left it. The air was thick with the scent of bleach, urine, and something stale, like old damp clothes left in a corner for too long. I wrinkled my nose and stepped inside. The door creaked as it shut behind me. As I did my business, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling. I froze. My pulse spiked, my breath catching in my throat. Someone had just entered. I could hear the faint scuff of shoes against the tile. I swallowed, waiting for the sound of a stall door opening, but it never came. Whoever was there, they weren't using the restroom. They were just standing, listening, waiting. I exhaled slowly, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it's just someone else stopping in. I reached for the toilet paper, and then the stall door next to mine shifted, not fully, just a subtle movement, like someone had been leaning against it and slowly pressed their weight forward. I held my breath. The footsteps resumed, circling, closer. Then a shadow passed under the stall door. Someone was there, and they were watching me. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The only sound was the faint drip of a leaking sink. Then, out of nowhere, a soft push against my stall door. Not a knock. Not an accident. A slow, deliberate push, like someone was testing if it would open. I felt my stomach drop. My mind screamed, "Get out!" I slammed my foot against the door, shoving it back. Silence. No footsteps, no movement. Whoever was outside had stopped. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I forced the stall door open. The restroom was empty, but the main door, the one leading outside, was swinging shut. I bolted for the door. My heart pounded, my breath ragged. I grabbed the handle and yanked. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I pulled harder, locked from the outside. I was trapped. My mind raced. How? Had someone locked it while I was inside? Had they been waiting for me? I spun around, searching for another way out. Then a sound, a soft scrape from behind. I turned to the stalls, the middle one. The door had been closed before. Now it was open, and inside I saw a pair of dirty sneakers standing on top of the toilet. Someone had been hiding there the whole time. I ran. I threw my full weight against the door, slamming my fists against it. "Help!" No answer. I turned back. Just as the stall door swung open, a man stepped out. His clothes were tattered, his hair wild, his face blank, but his eyes were locked on me. And then he smiled. I searched desperately for a way out. A vent too high, a window too small. I backed up, my chest heaving. Then I noticed it. A tiny window above the sinks. Small, but just big enough. I bolted for it. The man lunged. I jumped, scrambling onto the counter, my hands fumbling against the window's rusty frame. The hinges creaked as I shoved it open. Behind me, fast footsteps. I threw myself through. I hit the pavement hard, rolling as my hands scraped against the rough asphalt. I scrambled to my feet and looked back. The restroom door was wide open now, but the man, he wasn't chasing me. He was just standing in the doorway, watching, smiling, like he had been waiting for me all along. I ran to my car and sped off, my hands trembling against the wheel. I didn't stop until I reached home, locking every door, every window. I called the cops. They investigated, but the restroom was empty, no sign of anyone. The security cameras, disabled. They told me I was probably imagining things, that maybe it was just a homeless guy, but I know what I saw, and the worst part, the next morning when I stepped outside, a single dirty sneaker was waiting on my porch. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with exploring. I grew up in a quiet beach town, the kind of place where nothing ever happens, or at least that's what everyone wanted to believe. But there was one place we were never supposed to go, beyond. The dunes, past the stretch of tourist-friendly beach, lay an off-limits area. No lifeguards, no trails, just miles of abandoned shoreline. Parents warned us to stay away, claiming the tides were too strong, the dunes too unstable. But rumors spread among the kids. Stories about strange lights in the distance, about figures standing in the mist just beyond the waves, about the bonfire that never burned out. I was 10 years old when I decided to see it for myself. I waited until my parents were asleep, then snuck out the back door, my heart hammering in my chest. The air was thick with humidity, the sky pitch black. The moon barely peeked through the clouds, casting a dim glow over the sand. I crept past the regular beach, climbing over the dunes. My feet sank deep, the grains shifting under my weight, and then I saw it, a bonfire glowing faintly beyond the next dune. But there was no one around. I hesitated. Fires don't just start themselves. And yet there it was, burning low, smoldering. I moved closer. The fire crackled softly, flickering in the wind. Around it, the sand was disturbed, footprints scattered in every direction. And then I saw them, the clothes, buried beneath the ash, half burned, children's clothes. My stomach dropped. I nudged one with my foot, flipping it over. Beneath the soot, I saw something else. Photographs, crumpled, blackened at the edges. I reached down, my hand shaking, and picked one up. And then I froze. It was a picture of a boy. Dark hair, freckles, a wide grin. A boy who looked exactly like me. My breath caught. I stumbled back, my head spinning. This was impossible. I looked down at the other photos, my vision blurring with panic. More kids, some smiling, some caught mid-laughter. And then one final photo, a group shot, at least 10 children, standing around a bonfire. But their faces were blurred, like the photo had been smeared from the inside. I dropped it instantly, my hands trembling. And then a shadow moved. I snapped my head up. A figure stood at the edge of the firelight, tall, bald, watching. His clothes hung loose and ragged, his feet bare against the sand. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his eyes on me. He took a step forward. "Hey, kid." His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in years. Another step. "You shouldn't be here." I turned and ran. The sand dragged at my feet, slowing me down. The dunes stretched endlessly ahead, my lungs burning as I scrambled up. Behind me, footsteps pounded against the sand. Fast, too fast. I didn't dare look back, I just ran. I tripped, my knees slammed into a rock, pain exploding up my leg. I gasped, crawling forward, but before I could get up, a hand clamped around my ankle. "Wait," the man rasped. "You," I kicked hard, my foot connecting with something solid. He grunted, loosening his grip just enough for me to tear free. I bolted over the final dune, throwing myself onto the main beach. Lights, houses, safety. I sprinted home, slamming the door behind me. Only when I was under my blankets did I finally stop shaking. I never told my parents. I was too scared of getting caught, too scared of what I had almost found. Years later, I searched for that beach online. Nothing, no missing kids, no news articles, like it never existed. But sometimes, when I walk by the shoreline late at night, I still see the faint glow of a bonfire, burning, waiting for someone else to find it.